What's going on, everybody? Josh Engleman for Awesemo.com, and I am back with my FanDuel single-game breakdown for Monday Night Football's game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. Now be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all of our other content goes live. Follow me on Twitter at Josh Engleman so you can get updates to these sim results as we get closer to lock. I'm thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And finally, let me know in the comments section, who are your favorite options at MVP and at Flex for tonight's game? Some of the high-level information for you. 96.8, that is the average fantasy points of the optimal winning lineup for this slate. 58,500 is the median salary used. It's pretty balanced from a roster construction standpoint. Bears, 2.6. Vikings, 2.4. That's how often their players are showing up in the optimal, so it's pretty much split. Minnesota, 3.5-point favorites in Chicago with a 43-point total. That's pretty low for this slate. It's going to affect some of our decisions. It's time to dive in right now with the MVPs. All right, well, if we're talking about MVPs, we have a very specific best option at the top, and that would be Dalvin Cook. He's 17,500, shows up in the optimal 34% of the time. He's got the biggest projection of the slate, and it's not particularly close. Well ahead of Kirk Cousins and Nick Foles. There's not a Bears running back or wide receiver that is even close. Dalvin Cook is just very clearly the guy most likely to have the highest individual fantasy score. Now, 34% of the time means that 66% of the time it's a different MVP. I think Foles is probably the second best option. I think he and Kirk Cousins are pretty similar, but Foles is $1,000 cheaper, shows up in the optimal 13.5% of the time. It's a little bit more than Cousins at 12%. Following both of those guys would be Adam Thielen at 10%. And then you get down into the single digits. Allen Robinson at 9, Justin Jefferson at 7. There's not a lot to glean here. It's Dalvin Cook on his own level, then a gigantic gap, and then you can really make a case for anyone between Cousins, Thielen, and Foles. That Cousins, Thielen, Foles. It's weird when the first and the third name there both end in S. You just expect to say, it's not important. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to rank them Foles, Cousins, Thielen, then Allen Robinson and Justin Jefferson if you're looking to pick a wideout from both teams. Where we get into some really fun type picks is when we head to the flex spot. So the most frequent flex option to show up in the optimal isn't any of the guys that I've named already. It would be $8,000 Cordarrelle Patterson, 9.6 fantasy point projection for right now, shows up in the optimal 48% of the time. Bears are dinged up. David Montgomery is hurt. Cordarrelle Patterson getting used sort of all over the field. He shows up more often than anybody else. That projection and that price tag are too much to ignore. After that, you're flying all the way back up the list. Nick Foles at 13.5 is my second favorite flex option. Now, this also assumes that Dalvin Cook is probably your MVP, but Foles, my number 2 play at flex. Kirk Cousins, number 3 at 38%. So Foles and Patterson both get north of 40. Cousins gets to 38. Not too many guys joining him there. Dan Bailey at 9K, 32% chance of being in the optimal. I think that makes a lot of sense. The 43-point game total, the lower that total is, the more likely you're going to see a kicker in the optimal. So I really like Dan Bailey at 9,000. Dalvin Cook shows up in the optimal 30% of the time at the flex. That's like 64% of the time overall. Again, I prefer him a lot at MVP compared to flex, but don't feel bad about having him there. After that, you get into a sea of guys in the mid-20s. Thielen, Robinson, Jefferson, Mooney, Santos, Anthony Miller. All these guys are showing up in the 22 to 28% range of being in the optimal. Really difficult to separate those guys right now. That's going to be something you'll want to do a lot with public ownership projections. Go to awesemo.com/join if you don't have those yet. What I can say is that 10K for Ryan Nall doesn't feel very appealing. I think that he is probably going to end up a bit overowned, at least as of right now. 9,500 for Jimmy Graham. Only shows up in the optimal 14% of the time. So I don't know, maybe once or twice in a 20 max would be the most that I'd be looking to go for Graham. Alexander Mattison at 7,500 is sort of a value play, but he's kind of like Jimmy Graham in that I wouldn't want more than maybe 1 or 2 lineups with him in a 20 max. The lowest that I want to go would be Artavis Pierce. He's coming off of the practice squad, running back, trying to maybe take some carries from David Montgomery, but he's probably going to have Ryan Nall and Lamar Miller ahead of him. Pierce, if you project him for somewhere around 4 fantasy points, shows up in the optimal like 10% of the time. So you can get by having him in a lineup if you're playing a 20 max. If you're playing a 5 max, you can maybe get by having one lineup of Artavis Pierce, but I think the floor, the realistic floor, is Anthony Miller at 7K. You guys know the drill on Mondays. I don't have any public ownership to look at right now, so it's hard to talk about fades. I can only talk about guesses. I'm thinking Adam Thielen goes a little bit more owned than what I'm expecting. So I think Thielen is on pace to be a fade for me. I'm guessing Dalvin Cook doesn't get as high as I have him either. So I'm assuming I like Dalvin Cook a lot at MVP, and that will come at the expense of Adam Thielen. Again, I don't want to go too much lower than Justin Jefferson, and I think all of those guys make some sense. So I don't really have any other MVP fades. As I mentioned before, Ryan Nall, Jimmy Graham, likely to come in a bit more owned than I'm expecting, so I will largely be fading them. I'll probably be largely fading Adam Thielen at the flex spot at 14K as well. The problem is he's just sandwiched between Cousins and Foles, 2 guys that are significantly more likely to be in the optimal, but I don't think that Thielen will see the same sort of discount in ownership. So it's not that I don't like Adam Thielen, but if his ownership shows up, let's just say 30% at the flex, I know that I'm going to be light. After that, I don't really have any major fades. We'll touch on those a little bit more in my updated tweets, which you will find at Josh Engleman on Twitter, because why would you want to watch this and then not get the updates later today? I don't know. Alrighty, folks, that will do it. That is my FanDuel single game breakdown for Monday Night Football's game between the Vikings and the Bears. One last call, please hit the like button. It helps me out a ton. I love seeing that number climb. Follow me on Twitter at Josh Engleman, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we go live. We've got tons of content every day. It never slows down. Thank you guys for joining me. Look for the DraftKings link somewhere around here. If you're playing on both sites, you can get the DraftKings version of this video as well. Good luck tonight, guys. I will be back again for content like this Thursday morning for Thursday Night Football.